Good evening, everyone. My name is Shruti Balachandra, and I'm a junior at Northview High School. Joining student leadership Johns Creek was truly one of the best decisions I've made during high school. And that's pretty rare of me to say. No, but seriously, apart from every opportunity we've had and being able to expose myself to the world of careers, like standing in the same room as the district attorney and feeling the epitome of inspiration that hit me, all the way to making connections through external opportunities like the Student Startup Connection or the work we did with Mercer and the Johns Creek Historical Society, saying that it has been an experience is truly an understatement. However, I'm not done yet. My class and I still have 1 year left to go. Much more to do, much more to learn, and much more to experience. Yet, the same cannot be said for amazing graduates of today, even though their journeys are not even close to done. Even through a worldwide pandemic, they were so resilient, making an impact in our community despite the obstacles and adversities they faced. Like the resilience all of you have empowered, today we have with us someone who has taken the definition of resilience into his entire life. Dr. Tim Cunningham is the Vice President of Practice and Innovation from Emory Healthcare and Adjunct Associate Professor at the Nell Hodgkin Woodruff School of Nursing. And not only has he co-authored 2 books, but has worked in 24 countries outside the US, ran 63 marathons, and sits on the board of directors of the Clowns with Borders, CWB, a small nonprofit focused on sending professional artists into war zones, refugee camps, and other camps with the simple mission of catalyzing laughter and playfulness. Needless to say, a 2-minute speech would not even be close to sufficient to talk about Dr. Cunningham's work and achievements. However, we have the pleasure of him joining us today. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Tim Cunningham to the stage.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had to run up on stage because I only have a couple minutes. Thank you all. Thank you first for who you are. Thank you for all that you do and have done and will do, because we need y'all more than ever. We need leaders. Now, as you mentioned, I started my career as a clown. I never thought I'd have a leadership role. I went from clown to hospital clown. Anybody afraid of clowns? That's okay. I made sure that the exit doors would stay open and unlocked. If it gets too clowny here, you need to go out. I won't be offended. There are a lot of people I've met that are afraid of clowns, but I won't do anything clowny. I legit thought I would be a clown for the rest of my career and an actor, and I fell in love with the arts. But then I fell in love with a few other things, like nursing, like humanitarian aid, like trying to understand how this world functions, why this world functions this way. And now I've found myself in a leadership role at Emory Healthcare, where I get to partner and work closely with Heather Redrick, one of my dear friends and colleagues. And I also am accountable for roughly 35,000 staff members in thinking about their well-being and how they can be their best selves so they can give and provide the most compassionate, loving, kind care. I never thought I'd be here, and it's an honor to be on this stage. So as I was reflecting on my remarks, I was trying to think, like, what am I going to talk about? What is leadership to me? And it came to me that leadership is all about physics. So in the next 8 or so minutes, I'm going to give you a physics lesson. You ready? 3 topics of physics. Here we go. First and foremost, I'd encourage you, if you feel comfortable, to close your eyes. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I'm going to do a little visualization with you. This is physics lesson number 1. If you close your eyes, imagine with me a stage like the one you're looking at. Bring it to your mind's eye. And on that stage, it's full of instruments like you would see in an orchestra, like violins, violas, double basses, some cellos. Imagine a stage full of instruments, and they're all in stands. You might have a harp, a piano, all that. They're on stands, and there's not a single human being on that stage, okay? Seriously, close those eyes. Imagine that with me. Imagine that stage. And now, with me, imagine one person walks to the middle of that stage, and they walk right out there in the middle where the conductor might stand, and they stand on that stage. So now there's one human, and they have a violin in their hand. One human, one violin, standing on a stage full of instruments, and that one human plays the A string on their violin. Can you imagine that? As you're imagining that, I want you to think about what's going on that stage. Physics lesson number 1. And you can open your eyes after you've figured it out. Can anyone tell me what's happening on that stage right now? One human playing one violin, one A string on a stage full of instruments. What in physics is going on? Say it again. Vibrations, getting close. What else do we know? We're getting warmer. Oscillations. Here we go. Now we're talking. There's a term for it. Anybody know that term? Wave raves. I heard something else that almost sounds like it, but it's not like it, and we don't have time to get everyone to guess, but I'll tell you what it is. It's called sympathetic resonance. Sympathetic resonance. When that one person's playing that one A string on the stage, every single other A string on every instrument in that stage is doing what? It's vibrating. It's oscillating. It's physics. You can measure it. It's science. It's super cool. Sympathetic resonance. It's defined as this concept: if you have two vibratory objects in space, both capable of vibrating within similar wavelengths, if one begins to vibrate, the other one automatically, without being touched, because of sound waves, begins to vibrate, right? Sympathetic resonance. What does that have to do with leadership? Think about a time when you have listened to a beautiful piece of music, and something happens in that music and you feel it in your body. Think about a time, maybe someone that you have a crush on looks you in the eye and says, "I like you." How did that feel? Think about a time you saw a beautiful movie or a piece of art and you literally felt it in your body. Researchers and scientists call that empathetic resonance. And as a nurse, for all of you that pursue the great and probably best profession on the planet as nurses, you practice empathetic resonance every day. When you walk into a patient's room and you walk in and you say, "Uh-oh, things don't feel so good." Or you walk into a space and you're like, "All right, I've got this. Here we go." That's empathetic resonance. You're feeling those vibrations. Physics, stick with me. We're going to take it to the next level as the future leaders of this planet, and we're going to talk about compassionate resonance. Physics lesson number 1, and what I need you all to do. As you grow as leaders, as you pursue the fields that you will pursue, I want you to think about when you walk into a space, when you walk into a meeting, when you walk into a situation, to connect with patients and families and whatever you're doing in whatever field you're working, sense how you feel the energy of that room. Pay close attention to that, because if you're breathing, you can do it. And then apply compassionate resonance, which says, I witness suffering in front of me, and as a leader, I will do something to decrease that suffering. Because I would argue the best leaders on this planet are the ones working to reduce the suffering of other people around them. And you don't need 1,000,000 degrees and letters behind your name to see it, because you're a human being. You feel that sympathetic, empathetic, compassionate resonance. Leadership lesson number 1. Leadership lesson number 2. Imagine with me a flight of geese, Canadian geese flying over your head. What does that look like? If you were to look up and see a bunch of Canadian geese flying through this room, what would it look like? A V. Why does it look like a V? Exactly. I think I heard what you said, but I'm going to make up that I did hear what you said. Canadian geese fly for thousands and thousands and thousands of miles in a V shape. They keep going and going and going by changing their leaders. When you look at that V, there's one bird in the front and then the other birds behind. If you were to follow that V for a long time, the bird in the front eventually works its way to the back of the V, and then they keep flying. Why? Because the bird in the front, the leader, is the one facing all the wind resistance. It's all coming on them, balancing on their wings and shoulders. And over time, they're going to wear out if they stay in that position. But by moving to the back of the V and allowing another bird to move up and forward, what does that do? That keeps the whole team moving forward. It lets the leader rest so the leader can be like, all right, let me get my act back together, because eventually I'm going to be in the front again. And it empowers the birds behind the front bird to know that they too can be leaders. I think old school leadership models it's time for them to go. We've lost a lot of things in this pandemic, and one thing we lost is thinking about leadership in an old school way, where it's one human, one person, often one man, saying, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this. What if we think about leadership differently? And what if we think about leadership like a flock of birds, where we know our skills, we train in our skills, we take the lead when it's our time, and then we have the vulnerability and courage to take a step back so someone else can step up and we can lead together. And that's how Canadian geese can fly for thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. That's leadership lesson number 2. And that's a tough one. If anybody's curious to learn more about it, there's this great book. It's called Decolonizing Wealth by a guy named Edgar Villanueva who talks about that. And he says, what if we can lead organizations by shifting our leaders so we can all have a chance? And don't we all deserve a chance? Leadership lesson number 2. Leadership lesson number 3. I'm going to ask you if you're able to raise your hand in the air and stick one finger up in the air. Please, this finger. Go ahead, raise it up. I'm going to speak. Can you hear me okay if I speak? Okay, what I'd like you to do is just do this with your finger. Got it? Knock, knock. Woo. That's not the whole point. Keep your finger going. Keep your finger going. Now here's the game. Keep your finger going. I want the tip of your finger to go in a clockwise direction. Do not change directions with the tip of your finger. That's the rule of the game, okay? Do I need to show you what clockwise is? We're pretty smart here. Actually, the parents in the front, I'll show you what clockwise is. I know you students got it. So clockwise, it's going to go this way, okay? That's clockwise, adults. I know you students have it, you're like, duh. The goal of the game is to keep your finger going in a clockwise direction. Now what I need you to do, keep your hand in this configuration with your finger up and your fist like this and your wrist locked. Now very slowly, keeping your finger going in a clockwise direction, I want you to bring your hand down in front of your face. Don't change directions. Bring your hand a little bit lower in front of your torso and maybe down in front of your belly like so, and look down. And tell me which direction your fingertip is going in now. Oh. Why? Where was that O coming from and why? Did it go counterclockwise? I told you there's one rule of the game. What happened? Perspective. I'm going to say that in the mic. Perspective. Physics lesson number 3. Fingertip is going in a clockwise direction. By doing this, it's still going, but when you look down on it, it's going in the exact opposite direction. Perspective. About 4 weeks ago, I had the opportunity. I'm going to talk about clowns. The doors are open and unlocked, just saying. About 4 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to work with an organization called Clowns Without Borders. The mission of Clowns Without Borders is to go to refugee camps, war zones, zones of crisis, inside the borders of the U.S. and outside the borders of the U.S., wherever we're invited, and we do free clown shows. I love working as an actor. We do free shows, we do juggling, we do acrobatics. Our goal is to share laughter in zones of suffering. So about 4 weeks ago, I was invited to go to northern Iraq, and I spent 10 days there working in refugee camps in Kurdistan. And Kurdistan is an autonomous region in northern Iraq and parts of Iran, parts of Turkey and Syria. And we were invited to work with Iranian Kurds. And those of you that are familiar with the history of Kurdistan and Iran and Iraq know that in 1979, there was a war between Iran and Iraq. And at the end of that war, Iranian Kurds, who are Kurdish by culture, by belief, by heritage, were expelled from Iran. If they chose to stay, most of the men were thrown in jail or killed. And the rest of the Iranian Kurds that survived moved to regions of northern Iraq. And they've been living in refugee camps for more than 40 years, longer than I've been alive. We were invited to do clown shows with kids who were born in these refugee camps. And one day after one of the shows, a mother who had lived her entire life in the camp invited us into her house for tea. So we went in, we took our shoes off, we sat on this beautiful carpet, and she gave us cup after tea, full of sugar and deliciousness. And she said, Tim, when my family moved to this camp in 1979, we used to say, Inshallah, we'll come home someday. And many of you know that the word inshallah means God willing, or sometimes you can use it as a word for hopefully. And she said, for years we said, inshallah, we will go home, because as a refugee, you want to go home. And then she said, but over time I realized I had to stop saying inshallah. She's still religious, but she said instead of saying, I hopefully will go home, she said, I will go home. And now she says, I will go home. And she said, if I don't go home, my children will go home to Iran. And if they don't go home, their children's children will go home to Iran. If this is suffering, and this is war, and this is pain, as we see in our hospitals every single day, we as leaders have the ability to look up at it this way and say, there's nothing we can do about it. Hopefully it'll go away. Or, we as leaders, like this woman who gave us tea on that very warm day, we have the ability to shift our perspective. The suffering's still happening. The war is still happening. The pain is still happening. But we as leaders can train to help shift our own perspectives and therefore shift the perspective of others so we can look at something completely differently. That's what we have to do as leaders. We have to use physics to change the way we lead compassionately and with love. I'm going to close with a quotation from a book called The Book of Joy. Has anybody read that book? It's a wonderful book. It's interviews between His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who died just a few months ago. And it's a lovely book about philosophies and ways that we can think about coming together across the world. And there's a quote in the book that says, wisdom is like water. Both can be found in the lowest places. Wisdom is like water. Both can be found in the lowest places. So as you all grow as leaders, as you learn, if you're going to pursue nursing, I'd encourage you also to study art. If you're going to pursue medicine, I'd encourage you also to study music. If you're going to be an artist, I'd encourage you to also study nursing. If you're going to be a musician, I'd encourage you also to study medicine. Keep your mind open. Look for the wisdom all around you, no matter where it can come from. Look down, look up. Think about how you can shift the perspective. Many years ago in this country, we used to say women can't vote. Why? Because we've always done it that way. So when people come to you and say, we can't do this because we've always done it that way, it's your role as a leader to shift your perspective and help them shift their own. Seek wisdom, stay curious, and grow your compassion. I'm grateful to be on this planet and in this world where you soon will lead me so I can learn from you. Congratulations, thank you, and I wish you all the best of luck.